Okay, we're ready to start. Thanks everybody for coming out on a kind of nasty night. So we have a lot to do, but we'll try and go efficiently. I just kind of drilled down on the agenda so we can have Lisa start by updating us on some ideas that have already come out of these meetings. And then Renee is going to join us by Zoom, and she's going to talk. One of the things we realized is that it became hard to hear Renee sometimes the other night. So if everybody can hold their questions, write them down till Renee is done talking, then we can make sure that she can hear us and we can hear her.
Okay, this is everything that we came up with from all of our, am I echoing? It seems loud. Everything that we came up with in all of our prior meetings. The first part of this is additions to the budgeted expenses that came up in one of our meetings with the clerk's office, controller's office, and treasurer's office. So the clerk's office needed more overtime. I think we're having more night. That we're adding to expenses on the budget. Then the bottom part of the page, the bottom half of the page is cost savings. Renee found that we weren't paying the data center anymore. She told me that. We took that out of the budget in the general fund. And the additional revenues account for the rest of our, I called it potential savings, but it's actually potential revenue and savings. We've got reimbursement from the Business Development Fund for the Economic and Community Development Specialist. Wages and benefits total to $79,941 that will get reimbursed for that. Reimbursement from Cafe for the marketing strategist salary. A lot of his job is working with Cafe, so they're going to give us $20,000 towards that salary. And we didn't have the assistant grant administrator. We didn't have, okay, can you hear me now? We didn't have the assistant grant administrator salary in the CDBG reimbursement calculation because we haven't had one in a long time, so we didn't have it in there. So the total reimbursements for salaries is going to be $176,085. The total savings, if you take the 16.4 in extra costs and the 176 in extra revenues and the $35,000 cost savings, is $194,685. Below that is potential fee increases that they talked about during the neighborhood development presentation a week ago. They figure they can bring in an additional $277,000. And if we add all that together, we have 471,718 positive impact on the budget. So we can take that out of the appropriation of fund balance, and we can take the 194 out of the appropriation. The 277, I don't feel comfortable budgeting something that has to be implemented. So we don't know how long it's going to take to implement and what the effect's going to be once it is implemented. So we usually don't budget for potentials. So that's everything that we came up with recently or talked about during any of the budget meetings.
Thanks, Lisa.
Can you clarify to me how that transfer occurs, just for my freshman brain? Do we take that transfer like as needed, like at the end of the year when we start running low, so that if other expenses don't end up being incurred, that we don't make as much of a transfer? Or is that something that we do up front to know that we get through the year?
Normally, it depends on what our fund balances look like at the beginning of the year, because you realize we are at the end of the year, most of the taxes are collected, and we won't start bringing in tax revenue until February. So we have December and January to get through. So if we need it at the beginning of the year, if we need that in the bank, we will take it at the beginning. And that's what we've been doing the last couple of years.
Are there any other questions for Lisa? Okay, I think Renee would like to speak. Can you check, Frank, to see if Renee is ready to talk? And then remember, write down your questions or keep them in your head so we can ask Renee at the end.
I'm hoping to actually not say too much tonight. Can you all hear me? I'm still struggling over here. Sorry I can't be there with all of you. One thing that I did want to add is the grant project manager position in DECD. That's the position that will be replacing Jen Hoffman. That person, when they're brought in, will manage the flagship fund, the Commodore Fund, the Kiva program, any other ARP grant application projects we would have, and then RACB and grant administration for outside organizations. So in addition to having CDBG cover a portion of that position, which is already in the budget, we're also going to be adding a RACB and a grant admin fee to applications, so that, say for instance, an outside organization needs us to manage a grant for them. So like the RACB grants that come from the Commonwealth are pretty tedious. They require a lot of work. And so the city would manage that grant for an outside corporation or organization applying for that. We historically have not built in an admin fee. We've just done that work for free. We're going to take the lead of the Erie County Redevelopment Authority. We have their contract, the way they've laid out their agreement. So we haven't finalized the number yet, but there will be an additional reimbursement to that position as well. And that's the grant project manager that replaces the business development officer. So I wanted to make sure I spoke to that real quick. The other thing I just wanted to add is, through the PFM report, one of the biggest things that we learned is that we can't just cut our way out of the situation that we're in. We have to look at this from both ends, from cutting where we can cut and increasing revenues. And in order to increase revenues, we really need to expand the tax base. All of these problems started when people started moving out of the city and out of the urban core and into the suburbs, out of the outer ring municipalities. And so, we've got the same infrastructure that we need to maintain. We've got the same services that we've been trying to provide. And so to continually cut year after year after year without increasing revenues is a no-win proposition. And so, I just want to speak to the ARP funding. While it's not part of the budget, the reason why we have kind of been reluctant to put an exorbitant amount of funding through revenue replacement to prop up the budget, our strategy is much more engaged in looking at the long term. We're trying to provide the opportunity for more people to own homes in the city. And some of that is, the funding that we've given to the Redevelopment Authority, the Home ARP funding. These things will go towards projects to increase our affordable housing, to increase permanent supportive housing, to make sure that people have the opportunity to live in the city if they want to live in the city. Also, in terms of our economic and community development grants and loans that we're providing, it's to prop up businesses, to help small and medium-sized businesses grow in the city, to help entrepreneurs create their businesses. All that will increase EIT. Even if they're not living in the city, it'll still increase earned income tax. And so, I just wanted to make that comment that, we're looking at this from both ends. And, I mentioned the other night, but I don't know, I know it's difficult to hear on Zoom. And again, I apologize for not being able to be there with you. But, when Mayor Schember came into office in 2018, and we were working on the 2019 budget, and he gave the direction that he wanted to show council a 5-year budget. And when we did that, it was pretty scary because we saw that in 2024, we were going to have an over $23 million deficit. And that was when we knew we needed PFM. But, now next year we're looking at 2.2 million. And, as we continue to work our way through the PFM report, we've already done so much with renegotiating the union contracts and fixing the pension issue and paying down the debt and implementing the stormwater fee this year. Next year we'll be looking at doing other things. So, it's an ongoing effort. It's not going to stop. We're not going to be able to get it all done in 1 year. But working together, we've all made an enormous amount of strides here, and we look forward to continuing to work with you on this.
Thanks, Renee. Does anybody have questions for Renee? Silence. Okay. Now I'm going to talk a little bit. I don't know if anybody had an opportunity to look at that link that I sent you. It's not 1965 anymore. Report calls on Pennsylvania to expand city's revenue options. I think it's really important for this council. And the reason I've been thinking about this is because I spoke to the Jefferson Educational Society leadership group last week, and somebody there, actually it was Jenny Tonkin, who's been working on the Environmental Advisory Council ordinance, said she wonders if people in Erie look beyond Erie. And she didn't say that in a negative way. And I've always had to look beyond Erie, what else is going on. So I stayed up the other night reading that report. It's not 1965 anymore. Because structural deficits are not unique to Erie in Pennsylvania. And that report by the Pennsylvania Economy League, which was done under the direction of the Pennsylvania Municipal League, shows that other cities are facing similar or the same issues that Erie is facing. We can't go and change that taxation scheme right now, but we have to know that instead of like battering the mayor on the head. He's ready for it. He's I think you've boxed before, right? Instead of making it personal or, unique just to Erie about the challenges we face. It's all over here. So I also gave you that Philadelphia Inquirer story the other day. So I'm just going to run through some of the stuff that I put together here. Pennsylvania American customers will see higher water and sewer bills starting in January. Philadelphia Inquirer, December 8th, 2022. Water bills will increase by $8.76 a month from $60.48 a month average to $69.24 a month. Now, who knows when we get our water bills? We get them quarterly. We do not get a monthly bill. This is a month. The typical sewer bill, now this is for municipalities that are served by the privatized water company, Pennsylvania American. Typical sewer bills will rise by $30 a month, from $76.65 to $106.65 a month, a 39.1% increase. So we should be glad that we did not privatize our water system. We have a lease with the asset that the city had contributed to for decades. Scranton and Dunmore homeowners to see average $576 increase in annual water sewer bill. This is nowhere near what our customers are going to be facing because we raised sewer rates. Now, water bills are going up. Chuck knows, he's the liaison to the Water Authority. That's from the Scranton Times-Tribune. Scranton City Council approves amended 2023 budget with 2% tax hike. Scranton Times-Tribune, November 30th. Note, the mayor had proposed a 3% increase, so Scranton City Council took it down, but it's still a tax hike. Reading City Council adopts $100.7 million budget without a tax increase. City property owners will continue to pay 18.12 mills. It's really hard to compare millage, I believe, because there's different assessments in different cities, but the average homeowner of $100,000 in Reading will pay $1,812 for a property for property fees. In Lancaster, tax fee increases in city budget driven by necessity. Lancaster has not yet adopted its budget, I don't think, but it called for an increase of 8% in the city's property tax, and also, this is the mayor's proposal, also called for increases in the water and sewer rates, trash hauling, and the fee that funds the stormwater infrastructure. So we are not alone in doing that. But again, there's a tax increase proposed for Lancaster. Again, that it's not 1965 anymore. Okay, so what's happening in our region? I tried to find out about Mill Creek, and the only thing I could find, because I haven't seen a story about it, is Mill Creek Township adopted its first reading on, I think, November 29th. We know that Mill Creek is going to finally have to start paying the piper. In other words, paying for at least a small paid fire department. They don't have a paid fire department, so they're going to start paying for at least 8 firefighters. Anyhow, City Council gives preliminary okay to tax hike. Meadville Tribune. I went down a little bit farther, so I really do stay up way too late at night reading stuff. So this is a story from 2001. Erie could learn from the example set by Grand Rapids, Michigan, by Peter Panpento. That was after we had one of the very first reports saying Erie has to change or we're never going to advance. That was what's called the Bosworth Report. So the newspaper sent a reporter to Grand Rapids. And I would like, if you want to see how a user-friendly website works, visit that Grand Rapids website. Right there on the homepage, how to pay a bill, how to get your trash picked up. I love it because we are going to have a better website that's going to make this make our customer service better and hopefully make us more efficient. On my own list I put here, because I was all excited about the Reading thing, gateless parking goes into effect. Reading Parking Authority's citywide parking relief initiative provides additional parking options for residents in neighborhoods outside the downtown area. And that goes through Reading's website. This was actually the Reading Parking Authority website, but it explains how they responded to that need. I know, we've looked at parking, who's being hit by, parking fines, and here's a city that came up with a solution. If any of you have been to, I think some of you went to the Infinite Erie? What's it called now? Infinite Erie, is that the right thing? But some of you, Michael, you were there at the presentation at the Community Foundation. Mo, did you go to that one too, I think? Anyhow, some of the discussion about economic development has said, let's look at Buffalo. Buffalo's a place. Who would have known, a couple of, I don't know, decades ago, that people would be looking to Buffalo for ideas. Buffalo's really done a great job in reinventing itself. But you go to the Buffalo webpage, and what's one of the first things you see on their homepage? Where to park in winter emergencies. Because Buffalo is snowy, so that homepage is going to tell you right away, here's your resources if you get hit, when we get hit by a blizzard, it's right there. I gave something to Jasmine the other day. Chuck had talked to me about South Bend earlier today. And so South Bend expands utility assistance program to tenants. So it's not just homeowners. This is help with your water and sewer bill. Now, that doesn't come for free. Other customers end up putting money into that to help pay for that. Yeah. The city of Lancaster, I love the website there. Homepage has a drop-down language access menu. I think there's like 24 different languages. Go to the Lancaster homepage. You want to read this in Vietnamese, you want to read it in another Asian language, you want to read the website in an Arabic language, it's there. My last thing is, for years I've looked at something called the Digital Cities Award by, I think it's Governing Tech. So, and I'm talking about this because I know that there was a suggestion the other night, why do we need a data analyst? So Bellevue, Washington won for, they have a bunch of different categories of Digital City Awards by population. So Bellevue, Washington is a little bit bigger than us, but this is what they won for. Bellevue, Washington launched 4 interactive public-facing dashboards: economic data, sustainable Bellevue, council priorities, so get our council priorities out there, police transparency, which includes crime statistics, community engagement efforts, use of force reports, and information about diversity across, within the police force. Avondale, Arizona, which is they're in the population category 75 to 124,000. They allow residents to follow progress on the city's 5-year goals, including 29 key performance indicators and capital and operations projects. Now, we have key performance indicators that were put together before the pandemic, but imagine the potential for resident engagement to be able to follow that. So those are some of the things I think that we have potential to do better on. And then my other thing was, I don't know if you, I'm going to just, can you just pass those around? You can take one. I made one for everybody. I also did a little light reading, and I have not actually done reread everything in the PFM report, but I said, let's go back, and really what I think we should do is make review of the 2024 projections for the budget, and examine the PFM recommendations, the top agenda item for every finance committee meeting starting on January 18th. And we can create a tracking system action plan for each item we plan to examine. I'm thinking this might require us to do this at a study session rather than a finance meeting, or moving the finance committee meeting to a monthly study session rather than scheduling it before our evening council meeting. If you'll remember, the reason I had recommended that we do the finance meeting at night is because we know Mo has to leave to go to work. You know, Jasmine, your work schedule has changed. So I just think that, and I tried to incorporate ideas in here, starting with number 2 and going down, some of the things that were suggested here. One of the options, maybe rather than, or maybe in addition to talking to PFM again, might be to talk to the Pennsylvania Economy League, which was actually one of the organizations that put an RFP into the city when PFM was chosen. PFM did the work with the school district, and we know that the school district has continued to follow that plan, which has required tough choices, raising taxes. I don't know, are they meeting tonight, Mo, on those administrative changes? I'm picking on Mo, not picking on him. Anyhow, so the school district knows that they've had to make some tough choices. But Pennsylvania Economy League had a proposal that they gave to the city. PFM was chosen, but Pennsylvania Economy League, which is the one that said, these structural deficits are happening all across Pennsylvania, might be an option for us. Ed had talked about, can we get some help on the budget, and maybe that's somebody or an organization that we would engage to really help us. And maybe it would even be interesting, because Pennsylvania Economy League it wouldn't be PFM coming in and saying, do what we told you to do. And not that they do that, but it might be a different perspective. Anyhow, that's what I have to say. So I thought we could all go around the table and offer your suggestions. Want to start? Ed, I know you've been very passionate about this, or do you want to start over there? And you want to wrap up. You'll be you're the rapper. Okay, we're going to have Ed Brzezinski rap tonight. We'll start with Jasmine.
I mean, as far as suggestions, I just have an issue with the whole, we spend the majority of our budget on the salary, and then we are resulting to creating new salaried positions. So that's my only stance, is just that we don't have a lot of wiggle room once we have a salary in place, and then we have to cover the salary with increases to taxes. So that's my only issue, is just we don't really have a lot of room until we get these residents that hopefully will come one day to move here to be able to afford a lot of, what's going to be the expense of the bottom line.
Okay, and I'll write down all these things, and then we'll end up with Ed, but then we'll come back to Lisa, and we'll also ask Renee for your reaction. Okay, so I'll make sure that we get everybody's questions and ideas on the table and into the hopper. Mo, I didn't mean to pick on you at all. I wasn't sure when that meeting was, though.
I'm not sure, but I thought the different departments did a great job of presenting to us, and I was okay with everything that was presented, so I'm happy with it. I know there's some other ideas around the table for more experienced quarterbacks like Mr. Brzezinski and different people like that. So, I'm happy with it, and I don't really have any change or anything like that.
Thank you. Michael?
I want to echo Jasmine's concerns, and I know they have outlined that we do need certain things, but I'd be proposed that if we add a additional person, that we also add how are they being paid for. And if they, there's one here that's $79,000, I know that's not full-time plus benefits. So what's the totality of the expense? What's the totality of the fund source? And how much of it is going on to the taxpayers? And if we are going to use ARP money, we need to know in advance of adding these positions where that money is, how much of it is there, and obviously it will run out in 2026. So I'm sure we do need someone to transition us to the GIS, but I don't see why we should hire a full-time employee with a limited amount of money. I think that we should find a contractor who can help us transition into the GIS into, I guess you could, more toward a smarter city. And, there's a new thing that they call train the trainers. We should be, the things that we're talking about we need today are things that when the money's gone, somebody in this building should be able to do. And we shouldn't be looking at trying to absorb another 10 positions full-time with benefits into our general fund budget.
Are you making any cuts, Mike?
I want to cut all 10 until we find out where the money is, where it's coming from, what category it's in. I would say let's, because we don't have, so we have the ability to add them once we have these answers, but we do not have these answers, so I'm for taking the measured approach. We add the person when we find out who's paying them, how much they're getting paid, and where the money's coming from.
Okay, Chuck?
The biggest thing that keeps concerning me with, as we talk about how we've overcome a deficit, is that this year is not a balanced budget. There's a $5.8 million deficit being paid for with a fund balance of prepayments of $3.2 million. It's being funded with ARPA money. So as far as how those deficits were solved, the $24 million deficit that we were facing in '24 it's not a $2.2 million deficit. It's being satisfied with this other money. It's about a $10 million deficit still. And those funds run out. I mean, by the time we hit 2027, it says an $11 million deficit. That $11 million deficit still has our ARPA prepayments in it. So that expense budget, or that revenue budget, is factoring in that we need to make 20 cuts that year in order to be at 11 million. I don't have the same optimism as to that money's coming in, but I'm happy to work for it. So I mean, I'm excited about some of these revenue sources. On the next council agenda, we've got a resolution that I've sponsored that should bring in somewhere between 100 and 230,000 by what I've seen in other examples. I'm happy to attack it on the revenue side as well. I'm very concerned about adding salary liabilities with ARPA money, as Jasmine and Mike have echoed. I think that we have a little bit of an opportunity here with some of those positions not having filled up. I have talked to the different departments, because where my criticism has been is that I looked at the budget from 5 years ago and I saw where we added positions. So I went and I talked to those various people today. Renee gave me I don't know, I mean, she's under the weather and can't come in, but she gave me a lot of time today to explain where that budget wouldn't be getting there. There's some of those positions aren't going to be full all year. They're going to wait to replace one of the positions till they have someone running that department. They don't have someone lined up that starts January 1st, but according to the budget, they're paying someone for the whole year. So we started adding up those factors of it. There's maybe a $250,000 savings right there. I had a long email back and forth with the police chief. He was really helpful. He addressed specific spots. I had numbers as to where I thought we might have the spots, and he's coming back. I was hoping that we had not cutting anyone from their comp, not cutting anyone that has a job there today, not bringing the number any lower than it is today. I was looking at that and saying, hey, maybe we could save 600,000 here. He comes back and he's like, yeah, well, we're not filling these positions till May. We're not filling these positions till August. I asked him a long time ago about one of the positions that had been a lieutenant. It's still in our budget as a lieutenant. He assures me that it's not going to be a lieutenant, that it's still going to be a sergeant at a lower pay rate. But those are still in the budget, so those kind of things make me nervous. Like okay, but it's still in there. Am I giving you that range to extend it?
Could you just tell me again about the May and the August hires?
The next hiring. So like right now.
In 2023 you're talking about.
Yeah, so like right now I can't remember what we have budgeted, 195 officers, 193? We don't have 193 today, we have 186. We had budgeted for 195 this year, and today we have, I think it's 186. We're like down like 9. And they still expect to have the crisis car and the juvenile unit up by June. Like, stuff's pretty solid. And then, so we're never hitting the number that we ever budgeted them for. And they're proud. So any numbers I would ask them to come down from, they're saying they're going to do that on their own by not filling these positions for a duration. The same way that you guys did in the last budget by not bringing on the ARPA officers until last week or this week? When did they get sworn in? You know, like, so stretching those out is a revenue, is an expense savings that I feel like there's not, you know, I don't have the ask that I was talking about last week after the police chief explained that to me. I'm much more comfortable with it.
Okay, so it's more like there's money that assumes that the hiring starts on January 1st, but the budget could reflect that when those hire dates are going to take place, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
he went through all the numbers with me. If he doesn't come in $1 million under budget, I'll be, that's probably giving him too much, 600,000. You know, I was saying, hey, we probably need 4 to bring this down at 600 so that we could get to that $2.2 million shortfall that would have to be solved by taxes next year. I'd like to get halfway there. And he showed me the numbers. He gets us halfway there between the mayor not hiring people January 1st and the police department not hiring people January 1st. I feel a little bit better about it. I'd still like to roll back that one last ARPA officer. The opportunity we have with revenue replacement that was not in your that was not in the final rule yet. I would love to see that offset. To roll back that one officer would be a $655,000-ish savings. I would love to see that go through revenue replacement and then put into our capital fund so that we can keep the water reserve fund untouched in this season. And when I say that, that's because $1.2 million that we will have held back by the time ARPA's over becomes $2 million, given our historic trends. And that $2 million is a police cruiser every other year forever. You know, that's where I would like to see it. I know we have a lot of deferred maintenance and a lot of capital expenses, but that's the only thing that I'm going to look at and say, I'd like to see this rolled back. Everything else, by the end of the day today, I've been comfortable with.
Thanks for all your hard work. Ed?
I'm good. Everything's wonderful.
Okay, you sure?
Seriously, I mean, the only way you get out of debt is to stop spending money. And that's why my resolution is going in tomorrow morning. I am not going to sit here and tell the mayor to cut this or cut that. I'm going to give him a figure and ask him to find that money, because it's there. We know it's there. Take the police, and I'm liaison to police, and I don't want to touch the police. But we started with what, 191 last year? What did we start last year?
195.
195. We never had 195. What happened to that money?
It's still sitting in the budget. They're not using all of their wages, but
Why
you
do
have to
show?
understand that if somebody is not hired at any level, even up to the command staff, that position is backfilled with somebody from a lower position. All the positions get filled, and it leaves a hole at the bottom in the patrol unit. Now, that hole in the patrol unit is plugged with overtime from somebody else, because they still have the same number of units out on the street. They still have the same schedule to keep, so your overtime budget will increase. Now, they've been able to bring in a lot of grant money to counteract that.
I know that.
But this year, their overtime budget got cut pretty close. So I
Also
could
reimburse
see if
$700,000.
we were to put that in there that way and cut their
I'm not saying
regular
cut 'em, I'm
wages
just
by
asking-
a person here and a person there,
That's not my
half a
question.
person
I'm
or
asking you where the money went. If we hired these guys at the 6-month level,
yeah.
then there's 8 cops that weren't hired for 6 months.
Yeah.
And we allocated that money in the budget.
Right, so they're
Where'd it
coming
go?
in, it's still there, they're coming in under budget.
So did we then make less of a transfer from the water fund to cover the budget shortfall?
If we don't spend the amount that we budget in any given year, it goes back into the general fund balance at the end of the year. Your revenue budgets and your expenditure budgets, anything that's left in the balance gets cleared to the general fund balance when we close
So
every
when
year.
we paid for the 18 ARP policemen, you took those 18 policemen that you had in that budget already and sent the money to the general fund?
Not yet, I'll do that at the end of the year,
Okay, but that's what's going to happen.
yes.
Okay.
Well,
think
no, I won't do 18. I will do
No,
however
not
many people were working. They
Yeah.
started on June 27th, 9 of
We
them.
didn't pay, right, yeah.
So
That's half a
I'll
year.
pay those 9 officers while they're training. Once the unit goes online, I'll pay whoever's operating in that unit. And there are 8 more officers that we just hired that
next-
I'll reimburse a
next
couple
week.
weeks' worth of those salaries.
What I'm trying to say, in last year's budget, those guys that we are going to swear in next week are working less than 1 month in our budget. So there's
Right.
11 months of money that we're not seeing.
Right, we're not going to see the expenses that that are being reimbursed either. So that's a complete wash through, you know.
Lisa,
Yeah,
can
so-
we see maybe because we do have a finance meeting next week before our council meeting. Our preliminary budget just has year-to-date through October?
Yeah.
Is that right? Or is it just through September? It's through October?
Yeah.
So we won't close out the books, but we will have an additional month of those budget figures.
Yeah.
Would we be able to get that even in advance of the meeting? Because we always just used to call that falling to the bottom line, but, you know, Ed and Chuck are right, but it doesn't mean that it's like, I mean, we aren't giving like refunds to people or anything. I mean, that goes into, it had
So-
to be budgeted, but
Right.
it wasn't spent. but
That's
it's-
not money, that's an
So-
anticipated expense. And
So-
we-
I had a question, if I could jump in. So, this money is now in a ARP account. So we'll just use the 14.4 million. And so, as they draw down on that in revenue replacement, would it be correct or incorrect to say that there won't be a realized savings until 2026 when the program runs out?
No, we have to have it allocated in its final spot by the end of 2024. So if it looks like they're not going to spend it all, we have to put it somewhere where we will spend it by the end of '26. But we have to make that decision by December 31st of 2024. So, and that goes with all of the ARP buckets.
Are we taking out the 500,000 from the sewer fund, for the general fund this year?
We did not, no.
And we're taking 5 and 4? Maybe
We didn't take
Mine.
4 from, anything from refuse, just
Nothing
5
from refuse.
from the sewer.
just 5 from the sewer. And yet we did the increase. So why did we
Well-
do an increase if we can afford to take 500,000 out of the fund? These are just pain in the ass questions, I guess, but they float around like a cloud. I'm trying to figure out, the money's going someplace. I know it's going someplace because it's there. And I'm just saying that for the sake of the taxpayer, and we can compare Erie to any other city we want to in this state or in this country. The demographics are more important than the number of people. We have an awful lot of people on a fixed income. We have an awful lot of poor people. So you can't compare us that way. And once again, I sound like a broken record, but we just keep on chipping away at those people who have spent their entire life helping Erie become something. And that's why I'm saying, let's find out, that's all.
So,
Go ahead.
so one of the things we have to do is find other ways to drive revenue. It's good to see that the administration is opening up to different things or different departments to actually do things that are going to add revenue. Because that's what we need. At the end of the day, you don't solve these problems. There's larger problems in here, but they're policy issues, not necessarily budgetary
We need
issues.
economic development, Mike.
Huh?
We need economic development. We don't need retired people living in these apartments on State Street. I understand, I think you told me that the other night, right?
Or some.
Yeah. I want,
There's also Gannon professors with.
I don't want the brain drain. I want the kids that are graduating to want to be here. 3 of my 4 aren't. all because they had better chances other places.
So it also seems like our pilot agreements are down and our donations are down. It would seem that if we were going to pay for somebody, somebody should be out there, a stakeholder engagement, you know, they could pay for themselves and maybe somebody else by, you know, going to these other organizations and trying to get money. This is, where is it, like, where is it at? Okay, it's not on this one. But for our contributions to our city are down a whole lot. And, you know, and so, you know, even the nonprofits who don't have a pilot should understand that they have a shared responsibility to the city in which they operate, and really everyone should be wanting to do some type of pilot. There are some nonprofits that just pay their taxes, you know, even though they're not required to. And those are things that we need to have happen, because we need to expand our revenue. If we got, so let's just say something comes up on TV and it's a ball or it's an event and stuff, and you see 50 people, organizations that have given money to this event or this organization, this, you know, and it's like, okay, that's good. But if you got money to give to other nonprofits, you got money to give the city. I mean, the city is.
I don't think anybody would disagree with that, and
point.
that's why that was in the PFM report. It's on my list here. Seek out additional pilot agreements. I think Ed Betsa might be able to just bring us up to date on that. But the thing is, we can't go and think on December 15th. For the 2023 budget, we can't go and count on, what did I say earlier today, Lisa? I'm going to count our chickens before they're hatched.
Right.
But I think that everybody would wholeheartedly agree with you on that. But Ed, I know that the school district have been taking the lead on that, and I don't know what's happening with that lately.
So, just so we're clear, I mean, pilots are payments in lieu of taxes.
In lieu of taxes,
And
correct.
so the idea is that they would apply to, they're typically entered into with properties that may or may not be taxable. Oftentimes you end up in a gamble, and it's a negotiated result where you pay something less. Sometimes companies or entities want to do it out of public desire to help the city, but oftentimes it's when there's a gray area as to whether or not they qualify or don't qualify as tax exempt. And so the school district has the most to gain or the most to lose. So they've typically taken the lead on these historically. The three entities, the county, the city, and the school district, have not always worked together. That is not the case now. It can always get better, but the three entities work pretty well together and have, I've been here 5 years, we've done pretty well. So the current status of it is that the three entities, the school district, the county, and the city, are sitting down, comparing their pilot lists. Understand that pilots are entered into, often they could be separate. So I enter into a deal with the county, but I don't enter into a similar deal with the city or the school district. And that's not good. And everyone was guilty of it over the last 40 years, where they entered into these deals because I want to get a better deal, but I don't worry about the school district or the county. Now they're all working together, and we're actually going to compare them all, and we're going to work, and we're going to try to identify if there's anyone else that may be taxable that we want to approach. So I think that's already done. That's not going to generate a ton of revenue. I mean, it's a lot of money. I don't see that as it's going to take us from one point to a huge number. You're talking about, hey, I'd like to get some donations from entities that are clearly not taxable and not paying. That becomes more of a negotiated, well, maybe not negotiated. I can't force somebody to do it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I sat in on those things back in the day.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, they brought people in with drill cups, saying these are the kind of people we help. They're going to take money away from us. That's the honest to God truth.
No, and those are discussions that probably should be held.
Right.
And oftentimes we end up in these debates about, I don't want fees and I don't want taxes. And just generally the fee, if we have it, will apply to those nonprofits that don't pay anything. Whereas the taxes wouldn't come from them. So right now, if we talk about garbage, and I'm just looking at you because we talk about the fee, but if we don't want to raise garbage fees, let's just say, and the reality is then it comes out of the tax budget. So the taxpayers pay that versus the users.
I'm glad you brought that up because that's a moneymaker too, the glass.
Well, and there's...
I just took, I don't know how much glass down in Blessed Sacrament.
Oh, yeah. It could be good. And so I think
big savings
pilots are being looked at. I don't think there's anything we need to do to change it because that process is going good. And I would expect that next year we will have a clear report to provide to the county, the school districts, and the city as to where we stand. For donations, I'm not doing that. I'm not saying I wouldn't, but
I'll ask.
But those are things that we should probably work with the school district and the county to also develop kind of a giving campaign, so to speak.
And sometimes those donations come out of the pilot discussions. Maybe they don't want to sign and be committed to a pilot every year, but when they can afford it, they'll make the donation, and that we have.
So I have a question for Mr. Benza. So naive me, I don't know how long it's happened, but I was in Pittsburgh, and I went and bought a small item, and and I put my exact change, 6% tax, on the counter, and no, it's 7% that they put an extra penny on everything that's sold in Pittsburgh.
Can I, before Ed answers, can I jump in there?
You will.
And now I'm going to sound like a school marm, but if you had read, or if you will read that thing, it's not 1965 anymore, you can find out about how Pittsburgh was able to create, it might be different than it's because they are able to have a 7% sales tax. But Pittsburgh has that regional asset district.
Could do that.
And Chuck had just asked about that. He passed me a note about it. When I met with Scott Mitchell and Jane Earl, who's on the zoo board, and the new, Chuck, you had met with them also separately, I think. Who's the new CEO or
I just met with Scott.
Financial officer? Anyhow, the zoo says it really needs money. It has a capital campaign, but it needs operating expenses. And Jane Earl was really advocating for the regional, I think it's called a regional asset district. But Pittsburgh's the only one I think that has that right now. So
Pittsburgh and particularly Philadelphia operates on its own set of rules, but so does Pittsburgh to a lesser degree in Allegheny County. And so that's where the 7% comes from, is out of Allegheny County. We don't have that power to do that. That would be a legislative change at the state level, not out of question, but it would require the combination of other third-class cities and other similar counties that are struggling. So Scranton, probably not Harrisburg, but Scranton, Allentown, Erie, Bethlehem would all be cities that may be able to sit down and say, hey, we're all in this boat and we're all struggling, and a 1% sales tax might benefit us, and then take that up at the state level. But right now, certainly not for 2023, we can't do anything about it, but probably not in the next 2-3 years would that even be a potential option.
Ed, did you have the opportunity to look into that 2-3 year window that I talked about with people?
The problem is that they become, you could force the sale. We're talking about failure to pay your real estate tax after 2 years. It could go up for sale. And Mr. Brzezinski has long lamented the fact that it's about 3 years before it actually goes up for sale. I did raise this issue with the legal counsel for the contractor, in essence, that does the sale. It's McDonald Dillig. The problem that they face is that they get the list at the 2-year mark, in essence. I'm oversimplifying, but they get the list at the 2-year mark. They then need to do title searches of all the properties. They need to send out certain notices. And what that's doing is collectively it's taking several months.
Right.
I did ask, can we do it quicker? And the short answer was we could try certain things to try to move it up a month or two, but we're really not going to get to a point where we're going to be selling properties at that 2-year mark.
So the only thing we could actually do is get it in the papers and make it known to people that are taking total advantage of it. Because it's not mom and pop that live on 22nd and
well, it's everyone, but there are certainly some that are,
yeah.
I mean, even people that are just down and out and don't pay it, that they're following that same 3-year track. But you're absolutely right. There are people that are playing a game and sitting back waiting 3 years.
Costing us a lot of money.
On the, eve paying the bill.
I just wanted to bring back the nonprofits. Historically, city was Big Daddy. City had all the money. And when a nonprofit got started, city helped them. And now we're getting to the point that the nonprofits are bigger than the city in some respects.
Well, the idea
and, they were so busy this year that I think was the city mission decided not to have a Thanksgiving dinner because everybody else was having them.
Yeah.
I think it was a city mission.
Yes, it was.
Everybody else.
We currently have a case right now pending in court regarding the status of a nonprofit, and the city, the county, and the school district, again, by working together, are looking at these nonprofits and whether or not they do truly qualify. In order to qualify, I'm oversimplifying, but you have to provide an essential governmental service. So they are relieving us from providing that service that we would otherwise provide.
Would it be legal to charge them a yearly fee?
No.
For services that we give them?
There can be a service.
Streets,
just say
sidewalks?
It's a nonprofit fee, no. But certain fee, we just passed the stormwater fee.
Yeah, those we
and that would be a fee that is passed to all entities. So you can charge fees across the board.
It's looking for revenue, that's all.
Nonprofits are not exempt from paying those fees.
Right.
But they are exempt from paying taxes if they are truly a nonprofit. We've had some that we have challenged, whether or not they're nonprofit. And I expect that as money grows tighter, those challenges will increase. But it's not productive for us to do it alone, or to dump it onto the school district, or to dump it onto the county. If the three entities stand united, we're much, much better and stronger. And so that's really where we've headed. And so the current focus right now of those 3 entities is to look at pilots. And we will do that with all nonprofits, because all nonprofits are, not all, but many are potentially taxable or potentially untaxable. And rather than have that fight, why don't we work out some type of a resolution?
So I just had a question, because I live on the Lower East Side and I stop at many gas stations throughout my days, but does anyone know if the slot machines that are 3 to 6 to a station are being taxed, or what's going on with those?
I have the same question. It's the mechanical device attack, or attacks, not attack. I wondered the same thing after going into Lucky's the other day. Although
state money though. Right?
No. We
because
have
it's
a
a game of
tax.
skill.
Yeah, it dates back to like pinball machines or something. I did. Where's Lori? Lori was going to ask. Did you ask Dave Rocco about that? Because I asked.
We do have a permit. You have to have a license.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I do believe that that's a great question. I wondered the same thing, and it could be audited whether they're. I would think that would fall under it, Ed, because I'm telling you, this used to go back to like, if you had a pinball machine, you had to pay the city a tax.
Because I just noticed that some people are in there for long hours. There's multiple cars in parking lots, and it's hard to even get gas at times, and people are stuck.
Because it's an addiction.
Yeah, so I mean,
it's taking money
if we
from
can, let's see what we can get from that as
people who
well.
have the least.
I've been a big fan of trying to find ways to take revenue from bad things rather than good things. Don't tax my house for me making it nicer. that was my vacancy and foreclosure thing. You know, like let's find the bad things.
Can
I
I
don't know that we
address a
have that
couple of
answer tonight, but
questions?
we could find out. Pardon me, Lisa?
Can I address a couple of questions that came up when we went around the table?
Yeah, and also, don't forget Jasmine and Michael's questions. You'll probably get to that, or Renee, about how are new positions being funded and how many are there. I think a narrative on that would be helpful, like boom, 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 this is what we're doing. This Renee did it last time with the communications person, but I think if I'm right, Jasmine, you had a question, and Michael, you made it more specific about how are these positions being paid for. And Lisa, before you get to that, I just want to let you know, August 26th of 2022, Erie County Tax Claim Bureau sale of ceded land and or mobile homes for unpaid taxes, page 6B in the Erie Times News. That's where all those, everything was listed by municipality, I believe. And then under municipality, does it go by ward also, Ed? Do you know? I can't see it on here. I'll have to call this up and see. But you can go, if you're interested, anybody wants to look at this and get your fill of who's delinquent, I have it here. I don't know that I can send it to anybody. So anyhow, Lisa, I'm sorry.
I don't know that it goes by ward in the paper. I mean,
I'll look and see.
tax sales are not determined based on ward, but you could divide them into wards. But I don't know that
There's page after page of these,
I
and
think the
it
public
is
notice
by
might have
ward.
been that way,
So
though, in the past.
It might. I mean, I know the other municipalities just list them, but we have different areas. So I don't know how the paper does it.
anyhow, anybody
Courts
wants to
don't
look
do
at it, let me know.
They just say Erie.
Here you go.
Sorry,
Right.
Lisa, we're ready.
Okay, as to the new positions and how they're being funded, first of all, Renee's presentation the other night does take care of a lot of them, but if you turn to page 9, do you want to move to page 9, Tori? In your council book, not the budget book, the
Oh, I didn't bring that one.
all the handouts that we gave you.
Yeah, that might be in here too.
It has all of the police officers, everybody that's being funded with ARP money. We've got the crisis car, we've got juvenile unit, we've got an ARP program manager and
Same question.
finance manager. That's Jackie and me. The three of the new positions, other than the ones in the mayor's office and HR, are in the Department of Planning and Neighborhood Resources.
Wait, you're I'm sorry, I didn't actually realize that. You're the
Yes, I am.
Want to fight?
No.
I'm the,
ARP finance manager.
finance manager and
God love you.
among other things.
Oh, goodness. Thank you.
You don't
So-
sleep, do you?
Not a lot. There's the Department of Planning and Neighborhood Resources. These are three of the new positions that were proposed. The GIS Administrator, Data Analyst, and Grant Reporting and Compliance. Those are all being paid for with ARP funds, and here's all the details, their benefits, their pay, and the total
So-
amount being
So will that be
reimbursed.
What
Three.
bucket
Oh, go ahead.
is it coming out of?
That will be coming out of the
DECD.
administrative salaries budget. Or, wait a minute, we
need
added,
to split
You need a copy.
we will be adding probably a budget for that.
Say that again?
Right now, it's coming out of the administrative salaries
Right,
budget.
so it's coming out of the general fund.
No, the administrative salaries budget in the
In-
ARP fund.
So it's a
So,
three-year
I
job?
don't remember seeing a bucket for
Okay, I'll let you ask.
that.
There's a City of Erie admin bucket.
Okay, it's coming out of the administrative.
Right, now, the salaries get paid out of the Department of Planning and Neighborhood Resources. So you see the salaries in the City of Erie expenditures. But then you see a revenue line item, and if you turn to your revenue budget, There is a line item, account number 3679. There's a $2.5 million revenue line item that comes from the ARP fund.
Okay, so we just found our 2 million.
It's in there already.
Yeah, that's all.
Yeah. So then I'm going to show you the same thing.
I have a question.
Okay.
I wanted to know that after the ARP funds are done, the 2.5 that's here, which will probably be close to 2.6, how is that going to be funded?
Well, I imagine we've added some positions into the admin line item.
Thank you, dear.
These 3 positions are new, so we will probably be moving some ARP funds out of another bucket into here to cover these positions. But once the ARP funds are depleted, I guess that's a question for Renee,
General fund,
if she's still here.
raise the tax.
Yeah, I'm here. You know, what we've noticed over the last 5.5 years is that things ebb and flow, things change. Sometimes you need a position, then that position changes, you don't need it. So we would be consistently evaluating and reevaluating over the next few years to see what's needed, what should be changed. And then also we're in the process of going after some additional grant funding so that hopefully we won't even have to use all of our ARP funding for those 3 positions. We're looking at getting those funded in another way. And so we just haven't gotten there yet in time for the budget. And so the ARP funding was a stopgap measure, but we're actively pursuing grants.
And a lot of times when you hire somebody with the grant money, you put that in their offer letter that this money expires in 3 years and get their signature on it, that they understand that. That does happen here.
Yeah.
Right, so that would be a necessary thing. And, or we could hire contractors for the 3 years and have them sign a contract instead of onboarding them onto the official Erie payroll and
Pension.
pension,
program.
and you know, because those are one of the PFMers. These people that we are adding eventually are going to be our Achilles heel.
I think that, first of all, how long do you have to be here to qualify for the pension? 12 years. So I don't
Don't they pay
think
into the
that they're-
pension from day one?
They'll still be
Yeah,
around.
you get back whatever
We
you
get it
pay
back.
in.
Right, right. But it's money we can use during that time, right?
Well,
We give it back if they quit.
We give their
But we use, not
contribution
their-
back.
their
We
part.
don't give our contribution
Right? Of course not, yeah.
back to them.
I don't fully understand pension, and so, but dare I even say anything, but we're funding people that are retired now.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
And so, when you say we could use that money, we're using that money to pay out for the people that are retired. So, if somebody works for 10 years, they're paying in, we're paying in. But I'm saying, the money we're paying in is already going out.
Right.
But they're paying in, they get it back. So it doesn't cost the city anything if somebody were to stay here 10 years and leave.
Right. Except for 10 years, we're playing with their money that they're putting in
Well,
They will be given back without interest.
It would be a bad investment
for them.
for the employee
Yeah.
to put it in for 10 years and then pull it right back out without generating any
Right.
type of interest. But that doesn't hurt the city. And so we could sit here and say, well, that's a benefit, we should restructure pensions, we should eliminate them. I mean, you can go through all those possible scenarios, but it doesn't, right now, the current structure is if somebody stays less than 12 years, it costs us nothing.
Anyone ready to restructure pensions tonight?
Oh, so
So what can we get done here tonight?
there are some innovative things. I'm not saying they're good, they're bad, or they're in the middle. But I know a company that was bought out, and so they attempted to get rid of some of their pension liabilities by offering people cash payouts. And so, you know, you want your $1 million up front, or you want to wait 50 years for your $1 million if you live to be 120. But and so those are, you know, are optional things because and I'll get creamed for it, but you know, those are one of the. Borrow this from my colleague. It's in the PFM report. It's one of the things we can't afford over the long term.
Back to your question, though, about whether you want someone to come in as a GIS or data analyst, as a contractor or an employee. I think that we should ask the city planner that question about whether that would be a consideration. But I know this probably sounds optimistic, but that's why I went through that whole thing about what other cities are doing with data and with really robust websites. I have confidence that this will lead to, you know, obviously you don't want to end up saying, hey, we're going to keep growing city employment, blah, blah, blah. But if we can find the efficiencies, and if we start doing more services online, you know, it gets to what Chuck has talked about. Do you fill positions when they become vacant? How do we know? Where can we end up saying somebody's retiring? Do we need to fill that position? And we can do it better. I don't know.
Okay, so back to Michael's questions.
Yeah.
If you turn to page 10 in your handouts,
Okay.
that's your CBG reimbursement.
Okay.
It's up on the screen.
Okay.
You had mentioned that the $50,000 plus benefits wasn't, the $79,000 probably wasn't a full-time person with benefits, and that is the full-time position is E and CD specialist. It's about the fifth person, sixth person down. Do you see it? Okay, so if you follow that across, that salary and benefits is $79,000. And that is in the CDBG reimbursement now, and it wasn't. You can see I have 0 in the last column in the budget, and we added that to the budget. So there's $79,000 worth of additional revenue that we'll be bringing in. And it is a person, and this is where it's coming from, and it's going into that revenue number that I showed you earlier.
Thanks. That's been inconsistent from like presentation to presentation. Some of them have given us a salary. Some have done compensation packages. It's been tough to keep up with that. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. Because some of them compensation packages.
And that number is right on the edge. 79,000. That's right on the edge of where it could have gone either way.
I have one question. We're told all the time there's no money in the budget. If that budget is that clear cut, no extra money in it, what happens if we have one emergency or if we get a couple of big snowstorms? How are we going to pay for it?
If we go over budget, we would need to appropriate more funding.
I just said it, minor emergency, okay?
Yeah.
So we have to.
That would require an appropriation. If we were tight on our budget and we were making it, or we were maybe $100,000 away from being right on budget, we would have to appropriate some.
Is that like Biden printing money?
I mean, that's happened from time to time. Risk management, like they go over on their claims, some catastrophic illnesses happen, and they have to appropriate more out of their fund balance because they ran out of cash.
So do you have a total on how much we spend on office supplies and other supplies?
If you go
Cumulative, not by department.
cumulative, if you go to page hold on, I'll find it. Page 62 and 63 in the budget book are the roll-up of all the departments in the general fund by account. 72,000 in office supplies. Operating supplies, 337. Fuel, $875. And this kind of feeds into what I was going to talk about next, is that if we need to cut $2 million out of the budget, I'm going to start looking at either people or these items. Like maybe we can put a lower price on the fuel next year and hope for the best. Maybe we can guess that the 7% inflation that inflated our operating supplies and our repair and maintenance supplies is going to go back down, and we're going to be paying less for our repairs and maintenance. We can do all these things and make the budget look better, but if we miss it, and we're at the end of the year and we're over budget on everything, we're coming in for an appropriation. So I don't know that we want to do a $2 million change just for the sake of $2 million. If it's not, I can't find that $2 million in there, and I'm going to bring back a oldie but goodie spreadsheet.
Right. Can you
Yes.
can you find 1 million?
How are we closing out 22? I mean, I know we're only a week or two away. How much are we going to be under budget on our expenses so far?
It's not looking like we're going to be under budget on our expenses.
Okay.
So,
Because that's one thing, when I was emailing with the police chief, I looked at, and I figured out that we were 77% of the way through the year at October 7th, which put him he was accurate. He was under budget on his salaries by as much as he said he would be next year.
and then we're 300,000 over in fuel.
Okay.
We're 300,000 over in utilities.
Okay.
We're three.
Speaking of
Turn off the
utilities, with all the money going back and forth, is there a reason why the city actually pays for water from the water system that they own?
That would be a Chuck Zisk or AJ or Basil question. I don't know the answer to that.
Good question.
Probably just to keep track of it.
I'd love to move this along if we don't have solutions to actually put on the table tonight.
So,
Most of these things are things I feel like we could address in January.
right, so okay, so the people who are coming out of the administrative budget, so we have money for them for the next 3 years? Is that, would they included new hires?
Well, we can pay them through 26.
Right, but I'm saying there's enough money in there to pay them through 26 to include the new hires, because there's gonna be 7 new hires, correct?
Policeman, you mean?
No,
No, there's no.
I'll have to go back and look, but there's the 3 that I talked about
Right.
in there. There's 2, 1.5 in HR, and there's a communications director. And there was a grant administrator, but we kind of pulled that position. That's one of the items on the savings list. Somebody in-house,
so there was-
Jackie's
in
going to
neighborhood
take a try
planning-
at it.
right, so neighborhood planning, there are gonna be how many?
Neighborhood planning, 3.
3. Okay, because 3 there and then 3 in the administrative office.
I don't think there's 3. There's
No, just
there's
communication,
a diversity
And the
coordinator
diverse 2.
and
That's
the
HR.
communications director, and there's a half a person extra in HR. They had 3.5, and they're going to have
What's the chances
6.
of you getting help?
me getting help. I have 2 people in my budget. I just haven't been able to fill
Find
them. No, we
I'm
haven't. We
concerned for
haven't
you.
posted them yet.
You guys can't be working as hard as you're working. Stay healthy. I'm serious. I pick on you sometimes, maybe you think, but I love you.
So,
Thank you.
Lisa, should I ask Renee if she wants to chime in on anything? I know,
Yeah, did I answer everybody's questions sufficiently?
I think you did.
Okay.
But, but in theory, say we didn't hire some of these people, then we would be able to use revenue replacement and offset the deficit, say in the upcoming year, if we didn't spend down the money in some of these buckets.
If we didn't have it all allocated, we could probably calculate another 12 million in revenue replacement this year. But now, as it is, we would have to move that from one of the other
Right.
buckets.
Yeah, that's what
in
I
order
said. So
to use it.
theoretically, if we didn't make new hires, that would free up $2 million in the future.
Yep.
So if you didn't make the new hires, like what Mr. Brzezinski was talking about, he just mentioned you're working very hard, right? So if you didn't make those new hires, right, everybody's working hard. So those responsibilities that you listed for those positions would fall on other people, right? Or it just won't get done.
Right, it either wouldn't get done or somebody else would have to work a lot harder.
Right, so is that what was being done before you guys proposed a new position? Somebody else was doing those responsibilities, or?
I had 2 more people in my department in June.
So we weren't talking about the refills, we were just talking about
the
build outs.
All right,
Well,
the 3
But I
people.
will, can I just go back to Erie Refocused and say that the reason we have a neighborhood planning department is because that recommendation came out of a comprehensive plan that the city developed. Every place that we have looked to for guidance, or I'm talking about the universal we, not me personally, has talked about the need to build capacity in the planning department. We have a new person in there who understands what needs to be done, and is also was brought on at a lower salary than the previous planning director. So I think one of the things that maybe used to be done is that you bring somebody on, you're like, oh, that other person was already making that, we're going to start that. But thanks to having new eyes in the HR department and the administration working on those issues, that it's not always business as usual. So anyhow.
Well, to answer that, some of these things aren't being done and they should be done. The people that we have aren't able to keep up with everything that needs to be done, and we're way behind on our technology in that department. And I think a lot of, most of these positions are to set that right.
So, after you.
I just want to clarify for the record that if we didn't have the ARP funding, this would not be happening. Correct? These positions wouldn't be happening. Even though the PFM had recommended and said that this is what we need, we just didn't have the capability. So in 2026, with whatever's left, depending on how it goes, we will be looking at trying to cover these salaries because, no?
Only if we've raised the money to be able to do that. We'll eliminate the positions. I've been saying that over and over again. We're not planning to try to fund these with tax dollars or anything.
And as we implement new technologies, we can achieve efficiencies. So we might not need as every position that we hire.
And I did, Michael had talked about, the fee for like all those dump outs or what'd you call them, clean outs. And I said, I was like, you have no idea how excited I was the other day to hear that the housing court is moving forward. I mean, 5 years after we got that recommendation, it's going to happen. So, even the fees on the, updating the fees for the building various licenses and everything, we shouldn't be absorbing those costs. So there's going to be a place to address that finally.
So that's really my final point is sustainability. And so I'm not against hiring certain people in certain capacities in certain offices, but I think that we haven't done a good enough job of sustainability. To Jasmine's point, okay, if we did not have ARP funds, how would we pay for it? And, Chuck has been, talking to the city planner a lot, and like the one thing that you're bringing on could actually pay for a person in his staff. So I'm not against things that are sustainable. I'm against things that are unsustainable, that we either have to give away the benefit or put it on the taxpayers.
I'll just mention that the Neighborhood Resource Department did come up with a way to pay for it. It's just not ready to implement yet, but they did come up with that $260,000 in additional fees, plus the $99,000 we already put in the budget for the technology fee. So that should pay for their 3 people.
And some, because we need that system.
Right.
But it's not in place yet, so we're using ARP.
I agree, and I agree wholeheartedly. When I first got here, we were supposed to be updating our website and paid somebody a fair amount of money to do it. And and if you've been there, we'll know that it has gotten a little better. So.
Yeah, so pretty much, council, we would just like to, well, I know myself would just like to see if you're able to pay for the positions that you're currently adding later, can we please just see the record reflect, and then make sure that you guys are letting us know if you need any help with applying for grants and anything of that nature, because any money that we can access would help with our revenue and our general funds going forward. Some of us are going to be here for the next 3 years, so this is an issue that we care about.
I think I did ask Renee if she wanted to add anything before we close up. Renee?
No.
Renee?
I guess just a couple things, just to clarify a couple of things. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Are you able? Yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Jasmine had mentioned right at the beginning about how we spend, the majority of our budget on salaries and benefits, and that's accurate, of course. And one of the things that PFM pointed out was the reason that that's happening is because we don't spend enough of our budget on capital equipment, maintenance, because we just don't have it in the budget. And again, that's, that gets back to the issue of the structural deficit. So, PFM made the point that it's not that we necessarily have too many employees, it's just that we're not spending we don't have the funding to spend our budget on the other things that we should be spending it on. And so I just wanted to clarify that. And I think Lisa did a good job of showing where the funding comes from for these different positions. And I would just say that, as I mentioned earlier, we are continuing to go after grants. We believe we will be successful in getting some of those. I can't guarantee at this point how much we will get, but that should offset how much ARP funding we would have to use, and will help us into the future beyond 2026 if we're looking to keep any of those positions. And I just want to make a final point. The positions that we're adding are, to build our capacity, not only to do the work locally, but to go after additional state and federal grants. There's so much funding available right now, and we're at the point where our departments are strapped, because every grant that you apply for requires an inordinate amount of record keeping, finance, reporting requirements, measuring outcomes. Without data people to do the measurement of outcomes, without a communications person to put the story together, without somebody who's doing the grant reporting and compliance, it's been very difficult for us to manage that. People in finance have been working on it. People, department heads and assistant directors have been working on it. And that has reduced their capacity to get their work done. And so with every grant we apply for, we reduce our capacity to apply for more. Adding these positions will centralize everything to make sure that we're doing our reporting, that we're in compliance with our grant agreements. And it will also allow us to analyze the data that we need to analyze to go after additional funding and to communicate our need for that, to make the case. So really, this is an effort for us to be able to get a lot more of those state and federal dollars that are available right now that aren't going to be available forever. I mean, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and we really need to ramp up our ability to go after it. The other thing I just wanted to clarify on the GIS administrator, that person is not for transition. Erin Carey, who's our neighborhood planner, has been serving as the transition person to onboard the GIS system. When we applied for the STAMP grant and got the funding from the Commonwealth to move forward with GIS implementation, we always knew that we were going to need a GIS administrator, a full-time employee who's taking care of GIS. And so we're at that point now where it's taking so much of Erin's time that it's pulling away from her ability to work on neighborhood planning. And so that's why the GIS analyst was built in now.
Hi, everybody.
I don't know if anybody
Anything
else,
else?
any other questions.
I did have a comment though, and so while I agree that we do need a GIS person, but it would seem like at a certain point, most of the data would be added to our city plan where, you know, we move into an area where now we're mostly pulling the data instead of still needing someone to enter it and analyze it. Or so one person's opinion.
I mean, from my understanding is that that's pretty much going to be paying for itself with the fees that they're adding, with us going digitized. So
There's no fees for digital.
aren't we implementing a technology fee? Yeah, okay, yeah, I was pretty sure. Okay, yeah, thank you.
Okay. Everybody ready? Yep. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Jasmine and Mo and Chuck, can you stay for a minute? Because I just want to.
Yeah.
Chuck is like, today's the day Chuck's out the door. Okay?
Yeah, I know. That's all I want.
Not many days.
I'm just giving you something. Okay. Does anyone want to look at the